So I'm still Margie, and I'm still an alcoholic. I started to say I was at a meeting in Salem one night, and a woman got up at the podium and she said, every alcoholic knows when they've had their last drink. My last drink was September 19th, 1987. I can't remember the date of my first drink, but I was probably about 5 years old. I grew up in an Irish Catholic household. And when you got a cough or a cold or the flu or what have you, the medicine was a hot toddy. And at first I didn't care for the taste of this substance, but oh my, didn't it make me feel better. And I drank again from the time I was 13 on, every month for pain relief. When I was 16, my mother decided she was going to teach us to drink, and she allowed my sister and me to have a highball at Christmas time. I remember that was one of the best Christmases we ever had. And there were just my sister and I, the two of us grew up together, almost as twins. We spent in the same classroom for 12 years. We were only a year apart, so we were almost considered twins. And my dad was the alcoholic, and my mother's knowledge of alcoholism at that time was that people really never taught them how to drink. So she was going to teach us how to drink properly. I graduated high school, and you didn't drink in high school in my day. It just wasn't what happened. Maybe some people did, but the gang I hung around with didn't. And I went off to nursing school to Boston City Hospital. And alcohol would not have been allowed to come into the nurse's home, but we did bring it in occasionally. We didn't have any problems because of it, but we did bring it in. And of course, if we had been discovered, we would have been thrown out the door. But by that time in my life, I drank every chance I got, which wasn't too often, but whenever we had the chance, we drank. I met my husband in 1963, and any time that we dated, whether we went dancing or to a club or out to the movies, drinking was always involved. He'd have a couple of beers, I'd have a couple of highballs. We didn't get drunk, but we drank. And we got married in 65 and moved to Milton. Now, I grew up in Dorchester and was used to Boston City Hospital and ambulances and police cars and fire trucks. And if you don't think that was culture shock, I looked out my living room window one day, and there were 5 cows walking down my street. And I thought, oh my God, where have I landed? Anyway, I was with my husband every day now. So anytime I was with him, I drank. So it didn't take very long to become a daily drinker. But that eventually progressed to my discovering the morning drink, wonderful cure for a hangover. And that eventually progressed to drinking in the morning as well as at night. Most of my drinking was done at night when my responsibilities of the day were over. And that progressed to drinking day and night, which progressed to drinking any time of the day or night, which progressed to drinking round the clock by the time I got here. At the end of my drinking, I couldn't go 3-4 hours without a drink. Every cell in my entire body was looking for alcohol. And I just kept right on drinking. When I look back at my drinking, I always drank when I was happy to celebrate. I drank when I was unhappy to get happy. And I always drank for pain relief, whether it was physical pain, emotional pain. I drank to run away from life, and I drank to face life. In other words, I drank for any and all reasons. I didn't need a reason to drink. I just drank. And my goal in life was, to be perfect. I was going to be the perfect sister, and the perfect daughter, and the perfect lover, and the perfect wife, and the perfect mother, and the perfect nurse. And the only thing I became was a perfect drunk. My story, in a way, is kind of boring. I didn't do some of the crazy things that I've heard in the fellowship. I didn't get up and dance on tables. I didn't shoot cats out at 3 o'clock in the morning out the window. I didn't wake up in a blackout under an 18-wheeler in the Everglades. I didn't hang out in trees in San Francisco and smoke pot. I just drank. And I loved to drink. And I'd be lying if I didn't say that alcohol served me very well for a long time. Alcohol allowed me to feel comfortable in my own skin. I never recognized until I got to AA, that I was totally self-centered. I would never have thought so if you had told me that years ago. I'm a pretty nice guy, and I think about other people, and I was a nurse, and I spent all kinds of time caring for others. But self-centered was me to the core. And a lot of that self-centeredness was the negative type. I was never pretty enough, or never smart enough, or never anything enough to fit in. I always wanted to be part of. I was never cool enough. It was always negative self-criticism. And many times, self-grandiosity too. I thought I was a pretty cool customer. But I just kept right on drinking. We had 3 kids within 5 years. And as I say, most of my drinking occurred at night, when my responsibilities of the day was over. And I still managed to keep a job. I worked part-time because I had 3 small children. But I started to notice things about my drinking that somehow were different from other people's. I noticed one time taking 4 drinks, and it took the 4 to what used to happen to me in 3. And of course I thought this was a wonderful sign. I thought, I'm really good, getting able now to handle my booze, and I can keep up with the guys and become a pretty good drinker. What I was demonstrating was an increased tolerance for alcohol. But I didn't know that, so I kept on drinking. I loved to drink. And I can remember the neighbor coming over one morning. My husband was cutting the grass or something, and around 10:30 in the morning, he had come over, and they decided to crack a beer. And I was pretty hungover from the night before, so I thought, well, I'll have a beer with them. And that's how I discovered the morning drink. Magic elixir. That hangover was taken care of within 5 minutes when I got that beer down. And so I progressed. I noticed that when we would have neighborhood gatherings, and some people come from a dysfunctional family, I come from a dysfunctional neighborhood, and whenever we got together, whether it was at someone's house, whether it was a backyard cookout or a bash or something, alcohol was always present. And I can remember times when my husband would say, well, I'm going to check the kids in now. I'll be back in a few minutes. And of course, he'd never come back. He'd take the kids home, put them to bed. But Marge stayed while the booze was flowing. I discovered, as I said, the morning drink. And any time that we would have a chance to go to one of these neighborhood bashes and what have you, I'd go around the house and carry out all these chores like a whirling dervish You know, do 3 loads of laundry, clean the bathroom, do the kitchen floor, and get everything out of the way, because somehow, in the deepest part of me, I knew that when I got to that cookout or party or whatever it was, when I had a drink, that I was going to keep on drinking. So anything that had to be done better get done first. And I progressed like that, just keeping on drinking. In 1976, both of my parents landed in the hospital at the same time. And, you know, here again, this is how you deal with emotional pain. You drink. I certainly didn't need that excuse, but it sounded like a good one at the time. And I kept on drinking. And 2 years later, I was recovering. I remember one day, there was a bunch of us out in the backyard. I was in the middle of a horrendous hangover. And my daughter wanted to go for ice cream at Richardson. She pestered the death out of me, and I finally relented and let her go. She was hit by a car on 114 outside of Richardson's. And she ended up comatose and in intensive care at Salem Hospital. And you can imagine what that kind of guilt did to an active alcoholic. Fortunately, she survived that episode without too many major problems. She had a fractured leg and a fractured ramus under her eye and lost all the skin on her face, but she got better. And after she came home, I can remember saying to the 3 of them, I want you all in bed at 7:30. You don't have to go to sleep. You can read a book, you can do a project, you can color, whatever you want to do, but I want you in bed. It's been very chaotic, very stressful around here, and things are calming down now when Mom needs time to relax. And of course, Mom's idea of relaxing was a drink in one hand and a cigarette in the other. And I could not say to those 3 kids, you have to settle down and be in bed now because Mom's going to start drinking. And I don't want you to see me drinking, not the way I drink. I couldn't do it. So I just said to them, Mom needs to relax and it's time for you people to be settled down for the night. As memory serves me, I think they pretty much cooperated. I don't remember any problems over it, and I just continued to drink. But something strange happened in 1983. I drank for those next 5 years daily, as I said, mostly at night, but during the day too. I started to get physically ill. I couldn't eat. My appetite left. And in the back of my head and in my nursing brain, I said, wonder if that has anything to do with your drinking. I knew it did, but I was unable to admit it. I was unable to look at myself. I was unable to realize the amounts of alcohol that I was drinking were basically pathological. I would go to a different liquor store so people couldn't see where I bought it. Most of the time I had my husband buy it. He'd be out at a meeting from school or something, and I'd say, oh, when you're on your way in, bring in a pint, because I only had so much left in another pint that was there the day before. I could finish off a pint very easily, even though my capacity was growing all the time. But in 1983, as I said, I noticed real physical problems. I was carrying a football around on my right side. I knew that was my liver. The appetite had gone. Vomiting at any time of the day or night was a regular occurrence. Diarrhea had just been a normal routine for 5 years. I knew where every John was located on the North Shore. And these are all horrendous physical symptoms, and they're not pleasant to talk about. But it's my story, and it's what alcohol did to me. I remember a gal, some of you probably know her, was Stanley's wife, Carol, and she used to say at our Friday night meeting, I never abused alcohol. alcohol abused me. And I knew what she was talking about. But I certainly abused alcohol. Anyway, that illness, I was going up to Middleton office one day to do some paperwork. I was working for the visiting nurses by this time. And I just made the office in time to hit the ladies' room, and the vomiting had started. And I had been concerned enough to at least observe my drinking, to know that it wasn't healthy drinking, but desperately not wanting to stop. How does anyone admit complete defeat? Impossible. I couldn't. So I got sick, and the vomiting started and wouldn't stop. Day and night, a teaspoon of water wouldn't stay down, a popsicle wouldn't stay down, diarrhea right along with it, and this went on day and night for the next 2 weeks without stop. So I knew I was in trouble physically, and it forced me to seek medical attention, and I didn't want any local doctor. Somebody might know me. So I convinced my husband to get me over to this new place in Burlington called the Lady Clinic. And fortunate for me, I met a wonderful, compassionate, caring gastroenterologist. I'll never forget him. And he said to me, I had decided to be honest with him and tell him how much I drank. In the meantime, you know, as I said, I was observing my drinking and recognizing that it was abnormal and not able to do anything about it. But I heard an ad on the radio one day coming out of the National Institutes for Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse, I think. It was part of the NIH anyway. And I decided to write away for that information. And they had packets on talking about alcoholism and blah, 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 and I don't even know if Alcoholics Anonymous was mentioned, but there was a questionnaire. And I decided to take that questionnaire and answer it as truthfully as I could. Nobody knew I was doing this. And I was desperate, trying to prove to myself that I was not an alcoholic. So I took the questionnaire as honestly as I could. And then I turned over the page, and it said on the bottom of the page, if you answered yes to one question, you probably have the potential for being an alcoholic. If you answer yes to 2 or more, you may be an alcoholic. And if you answer 3 or more with a yes, then you probably are alcoholic. So I said, okay, let's check that one out. And I checked off all the answers. And I had 22 yeses and 3 nos. Guess which 3 I clung on to? I was never arrested, didn't spend a night in jail. I didn't lose a job because of alcohol. I quit them before I lost them, but they didn't ask that. And I never woke up in a blackout. I had plenty of memory losses and brownouts, but I didn't even know what they were. And you don't know what you don't know. So I clung on to those 3 no's until, as I say, I got that ill. And I decided when I saw this doctor at Lady also to be perfectly honest. And I told him my maintenance dose, you know, to get through a day and function normally was about 11 drinks, maybe with a beer or 2 thrown in. And after some testing and so on, blood work, etc., he came back and said to me, we can get your stomach squared away, Marge. He said, you have basically alcoholic hepatitis. What a cheeky bastard he was. Now, if he had said, hepatitis, I probably could have accepted it. But he said alcoholic hepatitis. After I'm telling him I'm drinking 11 drinks a day, wonder why he would say that. Anyway, he suggested to me at that time, he said, you know as well as I do, Marjorie, he said that the medical profession can do absolutely nothing to treat alcoholism. And he said, I suggest you go to AA. And I just looked at him sweetly and said to him, well, why don't you see how I do? And my head said, you can kick rats down on E Street before you'll get into AA. But I was so terrified and so frightened of ever being that physically ill again that I made up my mind that alcohol and I were parting ways. If that's what booze did to me, then there would be no more booze. And I stayed away from alcohol and remained abstinent. What I did not do was treat my disease. I know that today. I got away from the alcohol, so I got better physically. I was back doing paperwork till midnight and getting up and going to work the next day and doing the same thing all over again. I remember my husband and I going out for an anniversary dinner, and I forget what he had to drink, and I get a Perrier water and lime, and I was one miserable abstinent alcoholic. I won't say sober. There's a condition we call around here, sober and miserable, and that was me. There was no alcohol, but something was missing. And to me, that's one of the greatest definitions that I have ever heard of alcoholism. Something is missing. And I was able to stay away from alcohol, suffering, feeling wonderful that I didn't feel sick anymore and I wasn't vomiting, and I could get up in the morning and brush my teeth and put a toothbrush in my mouth and not throw up. I remember my daughter was probably 15, 16 at this time, and she was just starting off on her way to alcoholism. And she had been at a neighborhood party one night, and she drove the car into a neighbor's mailbox on the way home, and I almost broke my arm patting my back because I didn't drink. Wasn't I wonderful? Anyway, my husband ended up with a toothache one night, and he was miserable. He had a baseball on the side of his face, and under my kitchen sink there was a 1.75 liter of, I don't know, Chemleys or Old Thompson or good old American rye anyway. And it had been there for a year and a half unopened. And when he got that toothache that night, I knew it was going to fix him. And I said, I will make you a good stiff hot toddy. I'll give you a couple of aspirin. And as I uncovered that jug after a year and a half of abstinence, my brain is saying, you will regret this. And I said to him, I think I'll have one of those with you. And I did. And the world didn't stop rotating on its axis, and the sun didn't fall out of the sky. And his toothache got taken care of, and I saw the dentist in another day or two. I forget exactly what happened. And we took a ride the following Sunday, and I don't know, we ended up at Hampton or Salisbury or something. He said, let's go for a drink. And I said, okay. Now, if he had said, let's go for coffee, I would have said, okay. But he said, let's go for a drink. I said, okay, and we went for a drink. And I had my Manhattan, favorite drink on the planet, because it's straight booze, and it does its job. And that one was so good that I had another. And then the con game in my head started. Now remember what alcohol did to you and how sick you got. You don't want to go back there. So if you start drinking every day, you're in trouble. If you start buying it yourself, you're in trouble. If you're out in the street at 8 o'clock in the morning waiting for the liquor store to open, you're in trouble. Within 1 month, all three things occurred. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 minutes off, I was outside Merchant's liquor store waiting for that store to open. I got relief just getting the jug in my arms. And my idea of the next day off was to go home, shut the front door. My husband and son had gone to school by this time. My daughters were away in college. It was a wonderful environment to drink in. And I would lock the front door and pull out the phone and start drinking at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I got relief. And I can remember one night, years ago, I had said to my husband, I was concerned about my drinking. I thought I might be an alcoholic. And he laughed. He said, just because you have a couple of 3 eyeballs at night doesn't make you an alcoholic. And this one night he came home some years later and he said to me, and he had been out at a meeting, and of course I had been drinking, and he said to me, you know, he said, you were absolutely right. I said, what was that? About what? He said, when you said that you had a problem with alcohol, he said, you do. You have a serious problem with alcohol. And in my sweet, calm, lovely voice just said to him, no shit, Dick Tracy. And it certainly didn't do anything for me to have him say that, because now I was pretty much convinced. So I've said often that I knew for a long time before I got here that I was an alcoholic. But what was an alcoholic? Somebody who was addicted to a substance. Maybe if you take care of the substance, you take care of the problem. But I wasn't about to do that. How does anyone admit complete defeat? Couldn't do it. So I kept on drinking. What else would you do? I sat down one morning. I started in January. This is 1987, and I started thinking I've got to do something about my drinking. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had to do something about my drinking. And no matter how much I tried to control and tried to cut back on the amounts I would put in a glass, nothing worked. Absolutely nothing worked. And I got sicker and sicker and sicker. Well, by 1987 now, I had lost 35 pounds. Food would not go down. The booze slid down. Many times came back up again, but I kept putting it down till it stayed down. I had neuropathy in the legs. The football was back in the side, which was my swollen liver. And I came out to the kitchen at 9 o'clock in the morning with my quart of whiskey. I couldn't quite go through a quart in a day. Could polish off a fifth, but there was always a little bit left in the quart. Anyway, I had my jug beside me, and a sentence went through my head. I had planned all year from Christmas time on that I had to do something about my drinking. And we had an office in Danvers Square at the time, and I had to go out to put money in the parking meter, and I came down the stairs, and I knew I was going to be sick, and I'm thinking, oh God, 10 o'clock in the morning, where am I going to go? Maybe I could run over behind Lions Undertakers and throw up over there. But I had to get to the car. I made the car. I opened the car door, took my nursing bag, dumped its contents out on the seat of the car, and stood throwing up into my nursing bag at 10 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Danvers Square, and said to myself, this is where alcohol has brought you. But how do you admit complete defeat? I couldn't do it. Anyway, one of these mornings that I had my jug beside me at 9 o'clock, we're up to September now in 1987, I sat at the kitchen table, and this sentence went through my head. It never been in there before, and it hasn't come in since, but it came in that day. Why it didn't come a week before or a week later, I can't tell you. But the sentence was, you are going to die. My nursing background allowed me to know that. That caught my attention. One of the best definitions of surrender that I have ever heard is that the last thing you lost, or the next thing you were about to lose, becomes more important than booze. And the next thing I was going to lose was my life, and I knew it. My sister had been very, very concerned, watching what was happening to me, asking me if I had a death wish, knowing I was alcoholic. And she had heard an ad on the radio for Seminole Point up in New Hampshire, and she told me about this place. Of course, I was probably 3 sheets to the wind when she told me. And I said to her, who wants to go to some freaking hospital up on some goddamn lake in New York? Well, it wasn't New York, it was New Hampshire, but that was all right. And another time I had said to her, there again, 3 sheets to the wind, I said, I know God wants me in AA. And she said to me, well, if you know that God wants you there, why don't you go? Oh, don't worry if he wants me there by the circumstances. And he did. That morning, that voice in my head, I believe, was a message that I needed to hear from my higher power. You are going to die. So I had choices then to make. Fortunately, I called her. I went to the telephone book. I was going to say ran. I didn't ran anywhere. Let me tell you, I could barely get out of a chair. But I got the telephone book and I looked up the number of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I spoke to a lovely gentleman. I said a quick prayer first. Please, dear God, give me the courage to do what I know I have to do. And I called. And I said to this man, after he wanted to know what was going on, that I would like to talk to a woman. And he said to me, Marjorie, you hang up. And he said, somebody will get back to you. And I thought, oh good, here we go. It's in the mail, right? Oh well, give me time to have a couple more drinks. Within 5 minutes, a woman called, and she said her name was Judy, and she was a member of the Friday night acceptance group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Milton. She said, I understand you think you have a problem with alcohol. You think? She knew exactly what I was talking about when I told her what was going on, and her next 5 words literally saved my life. She said to me, Marjorie, you need to be hospitalized. And I thought, somebody on this planet knows what is going on with me. My husband didn't know. My kids didn't know. I mean, they knew I drank. They didn't know how much. They didn't know how ill I was. And if they did, they wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. No matter what they told me to do, I wouldn't have done it. That woman knew, and she was from Alcoholics Anonymous. That's what gave me the courage to surrender. And that's what I did. And I went up to Seminole Point, complaining about these freaking trees. Where is he bringing us? I mean, I was really on the verge of psychosis, and especially with alcohol withdrawal. And if I had realized that I could have drunk on the way up there, I would have brought the jug with me. But I thought I had to go in not drinking. So I made the tallest, the most gorgeous hot toddy you ever found in your life before I left. So, of course, by the time I got up there to the hospital, I was really in withdrawal, needless to say. They prevented me going into the DTs. And at the end of my drinking, when I look back now, that's basically what I was doing. I was drinking to prevent withdrawal. My nursing background allowed me to know that one too. We used to treat patients who would be post-ops with an ounce of alcohol an hour so that they wouldn't go into the DTs. So I knew some things to do. I can remember when I was in that treatment center saying to the other patients, you know, if I hadn't been sick, so sick, I would have taken it rectally, and I knew how to do that. But I was too sick, you know, to think about it. The greatest gift that I have ever allowed myself to receive in my entire life was that morning. And I went into Seminole Point. I spent 32 days there. That's where I learned about alcoholism and where I learned about Alcoholics Anonymous. And they told me or suggested to me that I go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I thought, oh, that's how they get all those people into those halls, huh? And they told me that when I would go to a meeting, that I would always feel better after I came out of a meeting. Oh, brother, what marketing they have, you know. I was a hard sell, evidently. But it's the greatest gift that I've ever allowed myself to receive. And besides the miracle of sobriety, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me back me. I didn't have the losses that I hear around these rooms. I didn't lose my kids or my husband or my house or my car. I even had the same cat. But at the end of my drinking, I had lost me. I did not know who I was. I brought into these halls a pathetic excuse for a human being. But that's a few 24 hours ago. And besides the miracle of sobriety, as I say, I was given back me. I learned the difference between abstinence and sobriety. I learned the difference between humiliation and humility. And I try to live each day, a day at a time, on life's terms. And being sober has allowed me to do just that. Life is not always easy. I was diagnosed 9 years ago with a malignant tumor up near my eye, and they had to go through my eye to get it. And I had 32 proton radiation treatments after surgery. Sounds terrible, but I didn't have an acre of pain. I had no pain after that surgery. But I lost my tear ducts, and I tear all the time. I had to transcend those things, you know. And I've been able to, you know, with the grace of God and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous and the support I've gotten. I've jabbered on long enough, and I'll just finish by saying thank you for listening, and I love living sober. That delightful sister that I had passed away 6 weeks ago from ovarian cancer. I was able to be present with her during her illness and during her stay in hospice, and she finally had a peaceful death. Thank you, God. And thanks for listening.
Thank you.